Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm so pleased that you are here listening and appreciate you being here. I hope you've had the most fabulous week. It snowed this morning. I haven't seen snow for a while, and it did settle for a little bit, which was always lovely to see, although it does cause chaos on the roads, but that's another conversation. This week, I spoke at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival on the Midlife Wisdom stage last Friday at NEC Birmingham. After that, I was doing author signing of my book, A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity and Thrive Alcohol Free. And I was reflecting on just how so much has changed over the past 4 years. As you may have heard last week, I just celebrated 4 years alcohol free. I was 4 years alcohol free on the 9th of November 2024. And it's just amazing. I started my talk by saying, if you'd asked me 4.5 years ago, would I be stood here in front of you advocating an alcohol free lifestyle, having written a book and have a podcast talking about how to thrive alcohol free, and also be encouraging people and inspiring people through wellbeing and transformational coaching to really explore that alcohol free lifestyle as well as thrive in all areas of life. I would have laughed first and then poured myself another drink and thought you were absolutely crazy. So it's amazing what can happen. We set all these goals and we want things to change in 6 months, or we have goals that are really short term, but it's amazing what you can achieve over a longer period of time. And these past 4 years have been incredible. And of course, there have been ups and downs as well. But by ditching drinking, for me, it was the first step to so many opportunities. It's also given me so many tools to cope with life and whatever life throws at me. And with the passion conversation, I wonder where you are when it comes to passions at the moment. Would you say you have passions? For me, the things that I had in my life were work, family, and then my passion, I suppose, was socializing with friends with a drink. So I won't go into the whole talk, but there was one thing I wanted to mention here that will hopefully encourage you and maybe inspire you to start thinking about your passions. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but it's a story in my book. And I remember in about 2018, seeing The Greatest Showman for the first time, the film. And I actually played the song Come Alive before and after my talk. And if you've not heard that song, I really want you to go and listen to that after you've listened to this, because the words are just so poignant. And I truly believe that when you're alcohol free, it's exactly what you experience. I won't break into song just now, but it is really about how you come alive, seeing the world in technicolor. And I'm paraphrasing, but once you've seen the world in a different way, you can't go back. And I truly believe that's what being alcohol free does. But I remember watching this film when it first came out, and it's one of my favorite films. I love the music. I just love the message behind it. But I remember watching this film and sobbing my eyes out and really thinking, where has my passion gone? What is my passion? What is that even? And it really made me think, gosh, there must be more to life, and I'm here for so much more. But at the time, I had no idea what that would be. And passion, I think I really started to find that when I then signed up to do the Mount Kilimanjaro climb that I did in March 2020 for charity. And I signed up for that in the June 2019. And ironically, I was reflecting on it and I actually went to see Hugh Jackman in the NEC Birmingham in May 2019. And Kayala Settle was there and she sang This Is Me. And it was a really fun night with my friend. And we were dancing the night away, singing along to his songs. So that was a little 360 moment where I realised I was speaking about passions at the NEC Birmingham, having seen Hugh Jackman, and I was talking about The Greatest Showman and Coming Alive. Yeah, it was quite interesting. But then I did sign up to do the Mount Kilimanjaro climb, the charity, and that fundamentally shifted my thought, and I became passionate about training for this feat that I was going to do. We did so many hiking trips and lots of walking every weekend in preparation for this climb. And we're very lucky we have the Chiltern Hills, so there were loads of places we could walk and we could practice. And the experience was life changing, but I say I climbed a mountain, came down, the world changed. So I didn't really have time to reflect on it or to embrace the fact that I did it, because a week later I was working from home, and then a week later it was official lockdown. Everything was different. But I remember doing that and just thinking there is more and I must have more in me. And I remembered my passions were photography. I took so many photos on that mountain, and the landscape, the terrain that you go through is incredible. It starts off really hot, and you go through rainforest and jungle, as it were. And I remember seeing lots of monkeys on the way down. And then you also go through desert plain, which you can see behind me, which you sort of walk through, and then you also go through all the snow and the snow-capped mountains. And so it's a really interesting and exciting, breathtaking piece of nature. It's the tallest freestanding mountain in the world. And it was an incredible experience. But I realized my passions were photography. My passions were actually, I love being out in nature and walking. My passions were languages. I speak Spanish, French, and I learned Japanese for a couple of years as well. So while I was out there, I also learned Swahili. I was speaking some Swahili to the porters and the guides. And I just remember laughing so much and really feeling very free and positive. And I think that was probably the start of me rediscovering passions. And then we got to November and I decided to take that 21-day break. And little did I know more passions would come out of me. So again, I used to love writing when I was younger, but I never thought about writing a book. And so it initially started as me journaling. And then I wrote the book, A Cocktail of Clarity, which again was a passion that I didn't really think I was ever going to do. And I love reading, and I'd always loved reading when I was younger, but found that I wasn't reading. I read more books in that first year than I had done in 10 years, probably prior to stopping drinking. Running was also a passion of mine that I'd completely forgotten about. And I used to love running at school. I did cross country and 100 meters, 200 meters, the hurdles. And so picking up running when I stopped drinking was incredible. And I've now done 2 marathons, something I never would have expected. And the other thing, actually, the fun one is knitting. I did knit when I was younger, and I took up knitting. I've been dabbling in knitting. I can't say I've been doing a huge amount, but that's something else I've been doing. I've certainly known Tom Daly, but knitting is certainly something that I find quite therapeutic. If you are listening to this isn't for me to brag or to say, look at me. It's more to say, come with me and discover your passions. I really want you to think about what is it that you used to be passionate about and what could potentially bring you joy and vitality. When you stop drinking, you realize you have all this energy and time on your hands, and it's what do you do with it? There's so much you can do. My passions aren't going to be your passions necessarily, but I would really like you to think about it. When I realized I'd lost my passions and I was sobbing away to this film, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, I think it's because as we get older, we think we can't do anything. We feel like we've passed it. I'm too old to try this, or I don't want to fail. I don't want to be embarrassed if it doesn't work out or if I can't do it. But we really need to just let that go and follow our passions, follow our joy, follow what lights us up, because ultimately that is the reason for living. I mean, what else is it for? We're not designed to just be one dimensional. We're not designed to just go to work and focus on family. There's so many more layers to us. And there's so many things that we just don't think we can do, or we don't give ourselves credit that we would be able to do them, or we don't even try. What we don't want to do is get to the end of our lives and think, why didn't I try? That's the biggest regret of people. It's not what they did do, it's what they didn't do. So if today you're listening to this and thinking, I might have lost my passion or I don't really know what my passion is, I encourage you to go out and think about what was it you liked doing as a child, or what is something that keeps coming up that you would really like to try, but you feel maybe you're too old or you're not brave enough. Think about a simple step that you can do towards that and take the first step this weekend and see where it leads, because we don't have to have all the answers. We don't need to know how we're going to do all these things. But if there is something on your heart that you really want to do, you can take that first step. And they say leap and the net will follow. So why not try to find your passion today? I'm rooting for you. It's a joy, really, to now have multiple things that I do. It's not just work and family. And I love encouraging people and supporting people on this journey. And so I'd love you to find your passions. And if you'd also like to take a break from alcohol and you want some help with that, then I'm here to help you with that. If you've taken that break and you're really struggling, or you're thinking, I'm not finding this fun or joyful, and you'd like to work with me in terms of getting tools, finding your passions, building healthy routines, looking at things like sleep and nutrition and exercise, also how to manage your emotions, think about your core values, think about the goals that you want to set. We're coming up to the end of the year, and January 2025, it's going to be a new year. So this is the time to start thinking about what are your goals and what are your intentions for the year. Again, if you'd like a one-off session to work on intention setting and goals, then I'm absolutely happy to do that as well. If any of that resonates after this podcast, think about what are your potential passions, write those down and do something. Just do one small step. It doesn't have to be a massive step. Just head towards doing one thing. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful. And I am delighted to introduce my guest today, who is Sinem Yildirim. And Sinem is a holistic life and leadership coach with a mission to help ambitious corporate mums nail the work family juggle so they can achieve their career goals without the mum guilt or burning out. And this is a different perspective because Sinem has never been a drinker. It's a really interesting conversation about how she navigated this world where drinking is expected and how she coped with it, having always been a non-drinker. Without further ado, here is the conversation with Sinem. So welcome, Sinem. So lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm really, really excited about this conversation. I feel like there's going to be a lot that's going to come out, which I don't know what yet, but it just feels like that.
I'm sure, and it is exciting. It's wonderful that you're here. So, for people that may not know you, why don't we start with a brief introduction?
Yeah,
Tell us a bit about
absolutely.
yourself.
So I'm Sinem, and if anyone's wondering, the name is Turkish. So I moved here with my family when I was around 8, roughly, and I've been here since then. And In previous life, I used to be a teacher. I worked in adult education for over 13 years. But more recently, I trained and qualified as a life coach, helping predominantly career-driven, success-driven, professional mums, corporate mums who genuinely are passionate about their careers and they want to continue rising in their careers up the corporate ladder, but they're finding the juggle, the balancing act a bit of a struggle. So my mission is to help them be able to balance that really so that they can continue to progress in their careers, because ultimately what I want to help women understand is that we're not meant to be one or the other, and help them feel fulfilled both professionally and personally. So that's my main focus these days.
Amazing. And I love the work that you do. I think that's so helpful for people because lots of people do think they have to choose, don't they?
Yeah.
Especially at a certain point in their career, and they think
Yeah.
it's not possible to
Yeah.
reach those senior levels because it's they'll have to give something up, or it won't work with
Exactly.
their
Or it'll
lifestyle
just be
or other
too much.
things,
There'll be no
or it'll
way
be
I
too
can
much.
deal with this. And interestingly, the
Yeah.
stories that I come across a lot is either the next step in their career is undesirable, or the idea of having another child, for instance, is undesirable because it will just all be too much. They're desperate. They really want to grow their family, but I can barely manage it as it is. So I just don't think I can do the next thing. Or likewise with their careers, they want to move up, be promoted, reach that more senior executive level, but I can barely manage things as it is. I don't think I'll be able to do that. So it's about
Yeah.
challenging those ideas and those beliefs and showing them that it is possible through very simple methods and techniques and tools.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, maybe we'll touch on some of those later because
Mhm.
I was in the corporate world for over 20 years. And one of the things that I looked at a lot was women in leadership and trying to get people into those senior leader positions. And it was a struggle. We did find that as you go up the ranks, there were fewer and fewer women.
Yeah,
I was in management consulting for a long time, I was in financial services. And so you do find that at the top levels, a lot of
yeah,
them were men. And I think with the organizations I worked for, we were definitely trying to get more women into those levels and succeeding to an extent, but still nowhere near where we
yeah,
could be. So what you're
definitely.
doing is really going to make a difference, and
Yeah.
no
And when
doubt
I
help
think
people.
about the support, the immediate support that I offer, that ultimately ties into my long-term vision, which is exactly what you've just said. It's that in those boardrooms, out of the 10 people in the room, how many are women? And why does
Mm,
that even matter? Well, because the corporate culture is very masculine dominated in terms of the gender, but also the energy. It's very, high stress, go, 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 let's do this sort of thing, which is great. But we also need a bit of the feminine energy as well. And I believe that the more female leaders we have up higher in the ranks, we'll be able to create a more compassionate corporate culture. And also, really just a balance of perception and a balance of input, a balance of approaches. Just with everything and anything in life, there needs to be a balance of, so in my view, with this case, it's a balance of the female and the male, the masculine and the feminine. And through the work that I do now, my vision, my long-term vision, again, is for there to be that sense of balance within the boardroom in the long term.
mm, yeah, yeah, that's really important. For the person listening who's used to these podcasts, we got a slightly different approach here because Sinem has never been a drinker. And so, what I thought would be really interesting was to talk to you about, we'll talk a bit more about your coaching and what you do, but from being a non drinker for pretty much
All my life. Yep.
all your life, how does that affect you? I'd love to maybe hear your story around that. And one of the reasons a lot of people, especially people that I work with or connect with me, they're nervous about deciding not to drink because they worry about what that means, how people take them, how do they navigate those relationships, how do they do the alcohol free first. But I'd love to get your sense in terms of, you said you moved to the UK when you were 8, and the UK, as we know, it's very much a drinking culture.
Yes.
And so how did you navigate that as you sort of went into
Oh,
adulthood and to now?
that's such a good question. And it's one of those questions where you don't really realize what you did or do until you're asked. So, just a brief explanation, maybe. So, I'm Turkish and Muslim. So, within our religion, drinking is prohibited. Now, I would say we're not strictly Muslim, and my dad drinks, of all people. So, we don't follow those rules strictly. So, what's interesting is for me, I guess while I was growing up, when I was younger, maybe that was playing on the back of my mind. Muslims don't drink. I mustn't drink. We don't drink. But then also knowing that we're quite flexible and open. And it's not that I've never ever drank. So obviously, like you said, we do live in a culture that loves drinking, let's say. What I struggled with most, let me get straight to that, would be things like freshers' fair at uni, where it almost seemed like the main objective was to go out and get drunk, which never made any sense to me because when you're drunk, you're not yourself anyway. So, how are you meant to connect with these people? So, I've never ever felt pressured. And maybe that's because I chose the right environments, but also maybe that was down to my sense of confidence within me. Whenever I've drank, it was always my decision and my choice. And that would only be to kind of fit in within the social circles. If I was out for a meal and if people were drinking, I might have a glass of wine. But the interesting thing is, I've never, ever enjoyed alcohol. I wouldn't say I've tried everything, but I have tried various things. And it's just the taste. I cannot stand the taste of beer, white wine, and things like that. So that probably has helped because there are certain things that I love the taste of and know I should not have as much, for instance, crisps and snacks and things like that. But I just love it so much. So, not liking the taste, I think, really, really helped me in not becoming a drinker. So, for me, it was always my own choice. When I decided to have a glass of wine, that was my own choice, but I would rarely get to finish it. But then last week I was out at an event, a champagne tasting event where I had non-alcoholic options. And I was there sat with a group of ladies for over about 2 hours. And it was really interesting watching basically these women change over time. The woman who I started talking to at the beginning was not necessarily the same woman by the end of the evening. And observing this throughout my time growing up, it for me, I just couldn't really understand why I would not want to be who I am because I could see the effects of alcohol. I could see how people would start to do things that are a bit silly. And I just didn't want to be like that. And I just wanted to be myself, really. And I do understand how some people almost hide behind that and, well, not hide, but use it as a tool to feel a lot more relaxed and feel more themselves. And there's that quote that says, if you don't need a drink to dance, it means you are truly at peace with who you are, or something like that. So I think to answer your question, it just comes down to me not wanting to be drunk, not liking the taste of alcohol to begin with, and not feeling the pressure to be drinking if I did not want to be drinking. Does that answer your
Mm.
question?
Yeah, absolutely. And you raised some really, really good points. I'd love to hear when you say the woman that you started with at that event last week wasn't the same woman. In what way would you say that was the case?
So I don't mean that in a negative or in a bad way at all, but it's interesting because at the start everybody was very much not reserved, but a lot more contained in the way in the things they said, the way they said it, and so on and so forth. But throughout the night, then those same people started to become just a lot more relaxed. And even in their speech, you can pick this up as people who don't drink and who are able to observe, their speech starts to become a bit more slurry. And it almost, I don't think ruin is the right word, but it almost affects the perception and the image you have in your mind of that person, especially if it's someone you've met for the first time. And again, it's still the same person, but the way they present themselves, the way they come across, the way they carry themselves, it changes in a matter of hours. And For me, integrity is one of my core values, and I want to be who I am, regardless of the circumstances and conditions and situations. And I don't want anything to impact who I am and how I present myself and how I hold myself. So, on the odd occasion where I did have a glass of wine, I would be very careful not to get drunk because I would see what that would look like. And I just didn't want to really fall into that category.
Yeah, it's so interesting being an observer, and it's one of the things I say to people because a lot of people who do drink don't want to necessarily give up drinking, or they think they're giving it up. They're not, they're only gaining, but they don't want to not drink, or they feel like it might be a sacrifice. Or so I tend to say, well, do an experiment and give yourself a time frame of how long you won't. I did a 21-day break. I know people do 30 days, 6 days, but give yourself a time that you won't drink, but also be the observer and experiment. And what you did last week with your non-alcoholic, I will touch on that in a bit, but I'm really glad they had the non-alcoholic versions. But what you did last week, really focusing on that and seeing people change and actually questioning it. And as you said, your core value is integrity. And so many of us are out of integrity when we drink, and we don't even know what integrity is because however many years we've been drinking, do we really know the real us? Have we given ourselves that time to really know the real us? Because every time we drink, it takes few days to actually fully get out of our system. So if in those few days you have another drink, you're constantly blurring the real you and not being authentic or living in your integrity because you've not given yourself the chance to do it. So that observation, and it is quite shocking and also a bit boring because you get it on nights like that, you either end up watching people and see them change a lot. But the other thing that I found is that people repeat the same story. You hear the same story about 3 or 4 times
Yeah.
in the evening, and you're just like, do you not
Yeah.
remember you've just said that? And
Yeah.
so again, just being the observer is a really good way to look at it. Don't
Mm.
put pressure on yourself, but just think about what is it that you're seeing with the people that are drinking when you're not drinking. And I know it can feel uncomfortable, and there are tools, and that's what I coach on, but give yourself that chance and actually
Mm.
observe and think about what does that say about drinking and the impact it has on us, and is that something that
Definitely.
I want? Because it's a really valid point. The other thing I was curious about was when you said that your dad drinks, and obviously you started by saying you're Muslim, and so
Yeah.
a lot of us think Muslims don't generally
Yeah.
drink. So what's the reason that your dad drinks? Is that has he
Well, he's
always
not strict.
drank, or
He's always, I mean, he never gets drunk. So when I say he drinks, it's the occasional. So the Turkish drink is rakı. It's a bit like the Greek one. I can't remember what it was called. Or again, within a friendship circle, social circle, it might be a glass of wine. So I've never actually seen my dad drunk in all these years that he's drunk. But at the same time, I have Muslim friends who would not even step inside a pub because that's where people consume alcohol. So as a family, we're quite secular and very open-minded. So again, with me, drinking alcohol, I know where to stop. I know what my limit is. I mean, yeah, that was the way we were raised, really. So again, my dad and his social circle would drink. I would sit at those tables with them. And there was never this is wrong, don't do it, or this is great, do it. So interestingly, what I've noticed in the British culture is there's almost encouragement towards drinking, especially as young people are growing up. And it's almost like a sign of becoming a man or a woman or whatever it is. And not that I'm judging it, but again, as the observer, it's very, very interesting for me to notice parents encouraging their children to have a glass of wine or normalizing the fact that you have a glass at the end of every day. And what I then think is, so well, I managed to get through all of that without that. So what was it that I did? So what I see mostly within friends and family is that one glass of wine at the end of the day is a reward for the hard day that they've gone through. But then I don't have that. So then how do I reward myself? How do I achieve the same effect of relaxation and reward and the dopamine and everything else without that? So that's interesting. But before we maybe dive into any of that, what I want to stress is for me, again, this comes back down to our core values, doesn't it? So we all need to have a strong motivation behind what it is that we do. So you said you encourage people just to try it out, just to do an experiment, just to do a test. But if they're giving up something that they love so much and so deeply, there needs to be a bigger reason beyond that. And for me, that bigger reason was the fact that I didn't like myself to become a drunk person, to be seen as a drunk person. And again, to lose touch with who I truly am. And maybe that's the concern here. Maybe we have so many people drinking so much alcohol because they don't like who they are and because they don't want to be who they are. And just like you said, it takes the body a couple of days to reset. And as soon as they start feeling those feelings or start facing their true selves with all their wounds and all their feelings from the past or whatever it is that they're dealing with currently, alcohol acts as a bit of a numbing mechanism, doesn't it? In most cases. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the first things I talk about is identity and knowing your why, because
Yes.
ultimately that's the starting point. So I absolutely agree with you. And then it goes on to practically how do you do it, but you need to know you need to fundamentally know why you're doing this. But you're right, it's a rite of passage for people as adults. It's what you do as an adult. It shows on 18th birthday you could go out with your parents and have a pint. I remember a colleague at work saying to me, and I think his son was 2 at the time, and he said, I can't wait till he's 18 so I can take him for his first pint. And I was sat there just thinking, that's the ambition. That's all you're really excited about. You've got a 2-year-old, and the first thing
Yeah.
that you think about is, I can't wait till he's 18 to have a
Yeah.
pint with him. That really made me just question it
But
again.
doesn't that just show how embedded it is in the culture? The pub
Mm,
culture, the drinking culture. It's like this is how we celebrate a milestone. We celebrate it by
yeah.
drinking together. And I get that
Mm,
because in other cultures, it's the food, for instance.
mm,
Food is that
mm,
thing that brings everybody together. And here it just happens to be the drinking.
mm,
But you can eat and overeat, but it won't have the same effects of being drunk. So yeah.
mm. It's the only drug that you have to justify not taking.
Mhm.
And it's just fascinating. I mean, obviously I was in the culture for a long time and thought it was absolutely normal. So I've been on both sides, but where I am now, it does feel like we have been, as a society, we are conditioned. And when you think about marketing of alcohol and the fact that it's everywhere, and it feels like it's something that potentially is just keeping everyone at a level and
Yeah.
holding people back potentially. And I certainly think it's the best kept secret, not drinking, because it does give you a superpower. It does mean that you go after things that maybe you wouldn't go after. And to your point, you talked about the reward aspect. And really, alcohol isn't the thing. Having that drink at the end of the day, it's not the drink that you want. And you were absolutely right when you touched on it. It's what's the feeling that you're trying to create, or what's the feeling you're trying to escape from? And that's the
Definitely.
question. And if you ask yourself that question, you'll realize it isn't the booze that you want,
Yeah.
but it's something more. And so, one of the tools that I talk about is as you go to reach for that drink, if you've taken a break and you're struggling, just pause and think, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? The word's halt. And the extra word is fearful. Am I fearful? That's the bonus. But depending on what your answer is, then go and do something other than the drink, and then come back and think, once you've gone for the walk, or you've phoned a friend, or you've punched a pillow because you're angry, or you've gone for had a nap, or you've eaten something, right? These are all basic things. But if
Yeah.
you do something else and then come back to it, you'll probably find you don't actually want the drink. You don't need it. But so many of us, it's so ingrained in our society, in our subconscious. If it's a sunny day, you have to go into the beer garden and have a drink. If you're celebrating, you need a drink to celebrate. If you commiserate, you need a drink to drown your sorrows. It's just there
Yeah.
all the time. So I think everything you said has just been really, really sensible. And it's interesting that you've seen that and obviously grown up with the non-drinking
Mhm.
perspective. Because one of the stories I talk a lot about was my first introduction to drinking, and that was at the Freshers' Fair. And I do remember just thinking that is what I need to do to fit in. I need to do this to make friends. And actually, it's cool because I'm an adult now, I can do that.
Yeah.
And actually, the people that didn't drink, my perception was they had no friends, they were
Yeah.
ostracized, no one wanted to talk to them. I love the fact that you talked about one, you had very strong integrity from a very young age, and you also very clear on what you want, but you also talked about surrounding yourself with the right people. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah. So just going back to the freshers, I can tell you my experience of that throughout uni, and I don't know whether this is because of Freshers' Fair or not, but I never managed to find good friends to connect with. And that's got a lot to do with the culture of the university that I went to as well. I went to the London School of Economics, and there was a lot of foreign students from a very different background to mine. So that could have been one of the factors. But because I wasn't taking part in those activities during Freshers' Fair, I would go to the lectures or whatever it was and then head back home. Did I feel left out? Yes, I did. But then again, I didn't feel that was an extra pressure for me to take part in because I was at peace with the decisions that I made. And talking about how much of a culture thing this is in the country that we live in, I really want to acknowledge how difficult it must be for someone who's grown up in this, who's surrounded by people where this is the norm, who actually want to give up. Because since I've been someone who's never drunk, I don't struggle with the no thank you or non-alcoholic please. But for someone who has been drinking all this time, who is surrounded by friends and family who drink, for that person to step up and say no more, that takes a lot. So I just want to acknowledge that and give a massive pat on the back to everybody who's been through this journey. It's hard giving up something you've been doing for such a long time. And it's hard not having that quick fix because it's not the booze, it's the feeling that it gives you, but it's a quick fix that helps me feel more relaxed. And in fact, if I'm choosing something else over that, then that means I'm going deeper within myself. And that's what a lot of people are avoiding. So, in terms of friendships and the people that I surround myself with, interestingly, more and more of my friends are drinking less and less. Maybe that's an age thing. But being Turkish, I am surrounded by a Turkish community where, again, some drink, some don't drink. But obviously, I grew up in this country and I've had a mix. But most of my friends growing up were always drinkers. If we ever got together in a friendship circle, out, at home, whatever that was, there was always drinks involved. And right at the beginning, where I said maybe it was the fact that I chose the right friends, I never felt under pressure. And if I ever made that decision, it was always my decision, my choice. Also, as someone who doesn't drink, I've never been one to judge anyone who drinks or to suggest them not to drink. It's up to everybody else. And I find that with the work that you do, it's so powerful for the person who's already made that decision. But if they're not there yet, I read a quote once and it was something like trying to help someone who's not ready to be helped yet. It's like trying to ask your 5-year-old to read Harry Potter. They're just not there yet. So that's my experience.
Yeah, you can't force anyone to not drink. And the purpose of the work that I do with this podcast, for example, and getting the message out is really to give people a choice and also see that there is another way, but there's no forcing or judgment or anything if you're not ready for it. But
Definitely not.
generally, if you're listening to this, is thinking about it because you
Yeah.
wouldn't be listening to something like this and you still might not be ready, but questioning what's the reason that you're listening to this podcast
Yeah.
would be a good start. And then going from there and exploring things a bit more, reading Quit Lit, and you can read my book, A Cocktail of Clarity, but just exploring it and deciding whether or not I don't work with people who need medical intervention. Everyone I work with are people that have made that decision and are
Yeah.
ready to do something about it because it wouldn't work. You can't force it on anybody. This is something that everyone has to come to. I know a lot of people who know all the things about there is to know and know that alcohol isn't good for you and logically are very aware, but they're not ready to do anything about it, or they think they might be, and then it becomes quite clear very quickly that
Yeah.
no, you're not quite there yet. Again, it's a tricky one, especially here because our society promulgates it with Christmas coming up. Or
Yeah,
you'll see as soon as you walk into a supermarket, it's all there and it's all on offer, half price this or half price that, because it's a way of encouraging people to buy more. This season seems to be one of the main seasons where you can really justify drinking as much as you want in that
definitely.
time. And on Christmas Day, for example, people start drinking
Yeah.
at 8 a.m. because that's what they do.
I
I think
mean,
it's that and holidays.
no wonder why everyone's so looking forward to Christmas. Like you said, it's all justified. The overeating is justified. The over drinking is just, it's almost like, again, coming back to the reward piece. It's okay. This is expected at this time of year. Just forget the rules. Forget everything. Just enjoy yourself. Like you've worked so hard all year. Just let it all go and enjoy. Great.
Yeah.
But like you said, that's not the only option. That's not the only way to enjoy life.
Absolutely. And you obviously had some really good people around you and good friendships and people that were respectful in terms of you not drinking and you never felt like you're under pressure to drink, which is fantastic. You also said that a lot of your friends are drinking less and less. And so what's your perception of that? And have those friends actually stopped or they're a lot more mindful and they're moderating?
So good question. So I have a few close friends who have recently stopped drinking, and what led them to that decision is different based on everybody's own personal experience. And then there are also friends who are slowly drinking less and less. And a key part of that, I think, is the fact that we're a lot more informed now as a society about the disadvantages and the health concerns that it can raise. But maybe it's an age thing. I turned 40 last year with very similar age group within my circle. And maybe it's almost that thing that kicks in when you turn 40. It's that I need to start taking care of my body. And I've heard alcohol's not so great for you. I'll just cut down on it. Or I've heard sugar's not that good for you. I'll be a bit more careful.
Mm.
That's what I've observed mainly within my current stage of life where I'm at and with the people around me right now.
Yeah, and it's so true. I talk a lot about alcohol and perimenopause and menopause and the impact on that. And at this age, it's probably a wise choice to stop drinking or to at least cut down significantly because it exacerbates all the symptoms you would find as we go through that. So I imagine that's probably one of
Yeah,
the reasons your friends have stopped. But it's so interesting because, again, 5, 10 years ago, people wouldn't stop in their
exactly.
40s. And
Yeah.
you're right, it might be being more informed, it might be people being more health conscious, but it just, again, wasn't a thing. And I think that's been
Mm.
helped by the alcohol free movement. This movement has grown so much. In the past few years, and the alcohol-free drinks industry has also grown a huge amount, so that people actually feel they have some options. And
Yes.
okay, it's still nowhere near where it could be or
Yeah,
potentially will be, but it's definitely heading in the right direction. The
definitely.
fact you can go into the supermarket now and you have some options that aren't
Yeah,
all alcohol is fantastic.
definitely.
So,
And so, two things there. Firstly, again, it comes back down to your why. So, maybe again, at this phase of our lives, when we're being a bit more careful because we're getting older, again, there's a strong
mm,
why behind that. So, as much as I might
mm,
love drinking, my why, which is I want to be around for my kids, is a lot stronger than my
mm,
desire for drinking. And then
mm,
to touch on the non-alcoholic options, maybe it is the fact that there weren't as many options in the past. So, people were feeling
mm,
stuck. And when
mm,
I went to this champagne tasting event, it's just so ironic that I went to it was a networking event. That was a champagne tasting event. But I made it clear right from the start before I confirmed that I would like some non-alcoholic options. And if that wasn't an option, then I would have been more than happy not to go. But they were happy
mm.
to accommodate that. And again, there's more and more people who are much more aware and more informed these days and who are strongly sticking with their decisions rather than being like, oh, I'll just have it this one time and I'll just have it this one time. But no, actually, I've made a decision not to, and I'd rather make that clear. And there are some pretty good drinks out there, non-alcoholic drinks. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm a judge on the World Alcohol Free Awards, so that's the biggest one
amazing.
alcohol free drinks. So I'm glad you said that. But yeah, we had hundreds of option products that entered this year, and the entries have just opened for next year as well. And they were from 20 odd countries, which really, and I personally blind tasted 50 odd products. So it is amazing how this space has
Amazing.
changed. It gives people that option to keep the ritual but change the ingredients. So
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
yeah,
And blend in, is that what it is?
social inclusion.
It's about the blending in. But if the person is drinking the drink again to escape those feelings, then the alcohol-free option isn't going to be an option, because ultimately they want that in order to numb themselves and forget about the worries of the world. But for those people who don't want those effects, don't want the health impacts, but also want to be blended in and, like you said, the social environment, then it's just absolutely fantastic. And we'll have more and more options in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about social inclusion, and I think we just didn't have that before. So I'm curious, let's touch on the work you do, because you work with people who really want to find that balance, be able to have it all. And my friend, she has a podcast called Have It All, and I was a guest on there, and it was, is it possible to have it all? So I love the work you're doing, because it absolutely is, and people have the choice and can do anything that they want to do and are able to still have the amazing leadership role as well as the children and everything else. What would you say potentially holds people back or affects them? And would you say that alcohol might be one of those things that might be stopping people from moving
Interesting.
forward?
Yeah. So one of the main, perhaps, fears holding women back, actually, I mean, there are so many. So, like I mentioned at the start, it's this fear of maybe not being able to handle it all. And then once again, that might lead to a very difficult day, juggling so many things, being here, there, and everywhere to everybody, spread thin, reach the end of the day. I need to reward myself. But the approach that I have is to carve out pockets of self-care, time for self-care throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, in order for you to constantly feel rewarded, feel good, feel fulfilled, so that you don't reach for these other things. For some people, it's alcohol, for others, it's sugar. And lots of other things. Maybe for some others, it's shopping. Like, I've worked hard, I deserve this. But there are other ways to fill that need, let's say. And ultimately, like you said, it's not the booze, it's not the sugar, it's that essential need. And it's interesting because the term have it all, it can come across as quite negative sometimes. It can portray a woman who's struggling and striving and grinding and hustling to have everything. But my definition and interpretation of that is having or creating a life and a career where you can be and you are the fullest, most joyful, most vibrant, and most expansive version of yourself that you can be. So ultimately, that is who you are anyway. But it's everything around us. It's the way we've been brought up. It's the things in our culture and society that slowly, slowly dims our light. So I want to help women, particularly, like I mentioned, those who are genuinely passionate in their careers, about their jobs. It's not a means to an end. It's not a 9 to 5 just to pay the bills. I love what I do and I want to create an impact. But how can I do this while I'm also raising a family and while I also deeply, deeply care about raising good humans? So then it comes back down to finding, like I said, simple. It has to be simple because this woman is already juggling a lot. Simple tools, simple tips, strategies, modalities, whatever that is, that's going to help her ultimately feel grounded and in control at all times. And even the word work-life balance gets a lot of bad rep. But my definition, my interpretation and understanding of the word balance is almost like at peace with where you are, who you are, wherever you are. Bad day at work, that's fine. I feel balanced. I'm at peace with who I am, where I am today. Bad day as a mum, as a parent, that's fine. I'm at peace. I'm at balance. So yeah, it's a hard one to answer. Ultimately, it's about helping these women have the tools and the strategies that's going to help them feel fulfilled, both in their careers and as a parent. Because, like you said at the start, most of the time we feel like we have to sacrifice one or the other. Most of the time we feel like it's not possible to do one with the other. So we'll have to just drop something or do less of something. But instead of thinking of it that way, I like to flip it and think of the version of you, the possibilities of you having that sense of fulfillment in both career and home. And I take it a step further and I say, not everybody is born driven and ambitious. And if you are, it's a part of you, right? It's within you, it's bubbling. That drive and ambition is bubbling within you. Then ultimately, that is your purpose, that's your mission. And not everybody, not every woman is a deeply caring, nurturing mother. And once again, if that's also a key part of who you are, then that is also a part of your mission. And it's okay to have more than one goal, to have more than one passion, to have more than one mission and purpose, because ultimately we are multidimensional beings. We can't just fit into one box or identity or label. And it's helping women realize this. So if you are that career driven mum, it's okay for you to be both at the same time.
Yeah, really well said. And I agree with that. And I loved what you said about where you're the most joyful person, most fulfilled version of you. It's really, and it's quite similar to the work I do as well, because it's really creating life that you don't want to escape from and having the tools to really be that joyful version of yourself and most content, and the peace the peace is
Yeah.
really key, being at peace. And again,
Yeah.
it's something that I suggest is one of the key benefits of ditching drinking as well, that sense of peace, that sense of being yourself, being in integrity, not being something different every time you have a drink. So I'd love to know, could you share one of the tools with the listener that you
Mhm.
maybe do that might be helpful for them if they're looking
Yeah,
to get
absolutely.
that
So
balance?
this is something you share a lot with your clients as well. So breath, honestly, like I said, it
Mm,
has to be simple, it has to be accessible, it has to be something you can reach for in the moment, right? And I do this often myself. It's just when you find yourself, a bit like what you said, when you're reaching for that drink, ask yourself these questions before you reach for the drink.
mm,
What does that do? It helps them reconnect with themselves, right? It helps them almost like recalibrate, realign with, hold on a minute, what's going on? It's the reconnection piece. And ultimately, our breath is one of the most powerful, free, so easily accessible and available resources that
mm,
helps achieve just that. So most of my clients experience a lot of overwhelm because there's
mm,
just so much to do and anxiety, but the anxiety kicks in when the mind is racing ahead into the future, anticipating all these things that may or may not happen while you're still stuck here in the present. So what the breath does is it brings the mind and the body into cohesion, into one place. And there are so many easy to remember ways of doing this out there, box breathing being one of them, which I'm sure you share a lot. So I recommend my clients do this as soon as they sense that feeling of anxiety or overwhelm, just to bring, again, the mind and the body back into coherence. But I start every morning with a short, simple breathwork activity. I end every day with a short, simple breathwork sequence. And throughout the day, I try to sprinkle in it as much as possible. It's that one thing that is just so simple. But I heard a quote the other day, things that are so easy to do are also very easy not to do because they're just so easy.
mm,
But again, coming back to the why do you want to feel calmer? Why do you want to feel more grounded? Well, because you don't want to react to your colleague who's giving you a hard time. You don't want to snap at your kids at the end of a very long working day. You want to be, again, that most joyful, that most vibrant, the most fulfilled, the happiest, the most content, at peace version of you in every aspect of life. So that's why it's so important not only to know these tools, but to actually implement them and to do them. And like you said, just do an experiment. I tell my clients for 5 days in a row, right? Just spend 5 minutes every morning. I obviously give them a bit more of a structure. Doing this, just tell me how you feel. Just try it. What's the worst that can happen? If anything, things are going to be much easier and better.
It's so true. Someone said the other day that personal development is not all the reading of the books and the doing the courses and everything else. It's how you react in the moment when someone says something that you don't agree with, or when someone criticizes you, or when you have to react to something your child's done. That's personal development, because that shows that you've actually taken on board those tools. You are doing the work, which then allows you to react in the moment in your best,
Yeah.
most at peace, joyful, vibrant way, as opposed to fly off the handle. And so everything you said is just so true. And breath work is so underestimated. You talk about breathing, like, but we all breathe, and we do all breathe, but it's so powerful. It really is. And as you say, it's accessible to
Yeah.
everybody and it's free. So we should all be doing that on a regular basis. And actually, our breath affects everything. So I fundamentally agree with that. Thank you for sharing. Well, Sinem, this has been a delightful conversation. Thank you for being on. Where can people find you if they want to?
I'm most active on Instagram. I am available on LinkedIn as well. However, I'm not as active as I am on Instagram, so that would be the best place for people to check me out.
And your Instagram handle?
It's my first name, surname, coaching. So Sinem Yildirim coaching.
Perfect. Okay, I'll put that in the show notes so that people can link into you
Amazing.
there. And as always, with as we've come to the end of the conversation, I have my question that I ask every guest. What does thriving alcohol-free mean to you?
With everything that I've shared, what thriving alcohol free means to me is being yourself, being the true version of yourself, and not being afraid to be the true version of yourself. Okay, so once again, we talked about alcohol being a tool to hide our feelings, hide ourselves, but it's accepting yourself as you are and being okay with that version of yourself and not needing anything else that's going to dampen that, because you might not be in love with who you are, but that's your perception of yourself. And what other people think of you may be completely different. So, living an alcohol-free life, it ultimately allows you to be just yourself. And that's so beautiful as it is. We don't need anything else.
I love that answer. Thank you so much. Well, thank you. I think it's been an amazing conversation, and it will no doubt be helpful to whoever listens to this. And it really is about balance, peace, finding that joyful, vibrant person and not being afraid of being yourself. And I think
Yes.
everything you've said's been amazing. So thank you for being such a
Thank you
great
for having
guest, and
me.
we'll
This is
speak
a
soon.
beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Sinem. I so enjoyed that conversation. It was really refreshing and lovely to get a different perspective when it comes to being alcohol free and the impacts of our society and how it's so ingrained in our society. And the way that you seem to have navigated it has been fantastic. I loved what you said about thriving alcohol free. And that is all about being yourself, being the true version of yourself and not being afraid of being that. I wonder if that resonates with you today. Are you being yourself? And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, do you know what your passions are and what really brings you joy, that natural high, that vitality, that real excitement? And if you don't, I encourage you to write some ideas down of what could potentially be fun to explore and then take the first step. Well, it's been so lovely that you've been here, and I hope you have an amazing week. And I will see you on the next episode. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.